I started my first business when I was 21. And I think I had 5 businesses before starting this. So the podcast is focused on founders that are struggling, that have failed.
All right, so we're going to get into what is a condenser microphone, why I hate them, and why you need to return that piece of shit. Do you have the receipt for that, and can you return it?
Yes. Okay, I'm writing down. Very interesting because you're right.
Welcome to Smarter Podcasting with me, your host, Neil Mackay, the podcast guy. I started my first podcast in 2019 just as a hobby one day because I was bored and I absolutely love podcasts. I lost my job during the pandemic, and because of that, I ended up starting 7 Million Bytes Podcast, where we now help people around the world make the best podcast possible. We've worked with over 70 podcasts, helped with millions of downloads, help with thousands of episodes, and help podcasts get to the top of the charts. It's my passion to try and make the best podcast possible. Now, in this show, Smarter Podcasting, we do exactly that. We share with you the tips, tricks, and failures of myself and my guests, and helpful insights and tips to help you make the best podcast possible. If you do want to work with 7 Million Bytes Podcast, you can go to 7millionbytes.com. There's a button that says Talk to Neil. That's me. And we can set up a chat and I can tell you how we can help your podcast. Now, in this episode, we are doing a smarter podcasting audit. This is one of my favorite things to do, is where a willing volunteer sends me their podcast. I listen to it, I look at it, and then I give them feedback to help them take that advice and make an even better podcast. So in this episode today, I'm going to be talking to Lumi Miron, the host of the Second Act podcast. Now, she lives in my home country, Scotland, but she's in Edinburgh. I'm from Glasgow, but that's okay. Edinburgh's lovely as well. She's a business owner as well, and she helps empower other business owners in so-called boring businesses like cleaning, which it's not that boring, I bet. So I'm really excited to do an audit today and talk to Lumi Miron. Lumi, welcome to Smarter Podcasting.
Thank you so much for having me here, Neil. It's a pleasure to meeting you, and I know about your success. And honestly, it is impressive the results you bring to the table.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, I don't really believe it myself, to be honest. When I say it out loud, I'm like, wait, what? Is that me?
Yes, it is you, and I'm really looking forward to basically destroy what I'm doing because I am completely new to the game. I just watched some YouTubes, read some articles, and just went with it and learned from there. You know how it is.
I absolutely know how it is. And I'm really excited to share with you. Like, one of the things I want to talk about is where we all start from, and you got started. And that's the biggest thing. I mean, I often think about where I am today. Even as I mentioned to you, we've just opened up a studio here in Saigon. And I've learned so much in the last 3 weeks. I wouldn't be able to learn without doing it. I don't just walk in and suddenly a studio happens. And it was the same with podcasting. I started with one microphone in a big empty room, and now we're recording in a purpose-built studio with 3 cameras and microphones. It's just crazy. It's crazy. And for anyone that is watching on YouTube, you'll probably see right now, this is my new office in the studio, and there's a whole bunch of cardboard in the back there. And that's it. This is it being tidied up. I was 5 minutes late for this recording because I was throwing stuff in the corner, so you can't actually see it. But this is the new office of the Saigon Podcast Studio. So if you are in Saigon, get in touch with me. But no, I start off every audit with the same set of questions. So I have some questions for you. So first of all, what equipment do you record with?
Funny, do you ask? Because I have my laptop, I have HD camera where I'm seeing this, and I just got my first microphone outside of my speakers, which I'm excited to test in my next episode. It's zero sound. I'm not sure. No commercial here. Just something I saw recommended on some of the posts online. And that's it.
Awesome. I got a question for you. Do you have the receipt for that, and can you return it?
Yes.
Okay, we'll get into that in a minute then, because I can see it already, and if you're listening, then you'll hear more about it in a second. Second question is, how do you do your editing?
My editing. So after trying an app which didn't work, I'm using Descript. And I found it with the episode I've done so far very easy to very user friendly app that you can edit, cut, add things. They also say you can add an intro, which I haven't done, but something I can learn doing later on.
Yep, that's awesome. We use Descript, and it's amazing. So let's now get into your podcast a little bit. What is your podcast niche?
Great question. Because I have a boarding business and I'm a business coach. I wanted to start this for other founders that have failed in their journey. This is not my first business. I started my first business when I was 21, and I think I had 5 businesses before starting this too. 4 of them big lessons. That's all I can say about them. I had a successful one. I lived it with my partner when I lived from Romania. So the niche is founders that are struggling because it's not a journey you are taught in school, not even in books or courses. Even if you do like business owner certification, it's something you really need to do it to fail in order to get better at it. And I know when I failed the first time and the second, I was devastated. I was young. There was no support community. There was no information. It was 20 years ago, though. So the podcast is focused on founders that are struggling, that have failed, and help them get the motivation. And the most important part, what was the lesson from those failures? Because those are where, the 3 golden nuggets are.
All right, that's good. You had an answer for that because some people don't even have an answer for it. Now, this is a bit of a tough one. What makes your podcast different than the other 250,000 podcasts that are published every single week?
Okay, great question. I think, no, my podcast is different because I'm coming not just from a business coach perspective or a podcaster perspective. I have failed. I have run my own businesses and I have another business outside of coaching. And I'm connecting directly with not necessarily like famous founders or people that have social media, with regular business owners. And I'm trying to find them local business owners or even through LinkedIn or other people that really have struggled, and what are the lessons you will not find in a book or in a course.
Nice, I like it. Then next one is, what is the goal of your podcast?
The goal of my podcast is to bring awareness, to create a community of people that they know running a business is not an easy job. Not everyone can do it. And that's perfectly fine. And understand that failures are part of the journey. Just normalize it, make it easier to talk about them. Hey, I went bankrupt. That's fine. I can go, I can try again. It's not like the end of the world. It has a big financial and emotional impact because it completely impacts the way you see yourself in your capacity. In the big scheme of things, it doesn't mean anything. It's just a very powerful lesson.
And last question, what lessons or values do you want the listener to come away with at the end of each episode?
Oh, I love this one. I feel the best thing that can come out is one, see failure as being a normal part of the journey without too much emotional baggage attached to it and guilt and, disappointment and all those things. Two, see business as a fun game, which it is if you take out the seriousness out of it, because in the end, it's just, I think the game is the best way to describe it. If you know how to play poker or chess or other things, it's just arranging your pieces to move forward, knowing that you are not alone in this. Everyone that runs a business struggles with similar things. There are details that make differences from business to business, from person to person, but they all bring their own beliefs, their own experiences to the entire decision making, and that can influence how they run their own business.
As someone who is running their own business, I love it. And I think there's so much that can make your podcast successful. And it seems like you've thought about a lot of these things, and there's a lot of great answers in there. So let's get into your podcast, and some of your answers there are going to tie back into some of what we're going to talk about today. So my first question for you, though, is it's quite a direct one because I looked at your podcast on Spotify. Are you serious about making a podcast? Because you've only posted one episode and it was 6 weeks ago.
Yes, I was just thinking about this encounter and the fact that I only have. I started the podcast and then lots of things happened, from my father dying to I had some health issues with my kids. And I had planned a second episode recording and I had to postpone it and postpone it again. So I am very serious, but I feel this has been a very difficult year because there are a couple of, you plan some things and then life throws other things at you and you just have to prioritize what's most important. A recording coming up, and I want to get back into finding more people invited for the podcast, which I wasn't able to do so. But I have a recording and should be up this month by next Friday, and then up from there. Yes, I know.
Well, now I feel like that your father died. I'm so sorry to hear that, and then you've had health issues with your kids. So now I'm a total dickhead.
No, you didn't know that, and it's just part of life. It's nothing could have changed it. Nothing could have prepared anyone for this, and it's just happened. And when that thing happened, you just have to put everything on hold and prioritize what's more important for you, which in my case was family and my emotional being.
1,000,000%, of course, yeah. And I mean, things happen all the time. I've gone through some stuff as well this year, good and bad, and sometimes you just can't do an episode. What I do in those cases, which you're not at that stage yet, is I'll post an old episode, and I even have done this in the last couple of weeks, where my team will message me and they'll be like, "Hey, do you have an episode for this week?" And I'll be like, "I've just run out of time. Like, I just literally don't have time. Can you post an old episode?" And they'll post, because on Smarter Podcasting, this show, I looked just today, and we're up to 73 episodes, and so we're actually going to now start using those older episodes. I'll explain a bit more about that later, but my other show that I started in 2019 that led to this whole career, we're up to now, I think, over 350 episodes. So we have a huge back catalog, and actually 80% of our listens every week come from the back catalog, not the new episodes. So it's not happened for a little while, but if there's a point where, again, life happens and you're too busy, I'll dip into the back catalog. And literally that's what's happened with this show, Smarter Podcasting. If you look at our last couple of episodes, they've actually been previous episodes. And you might just think we're doing that just because. We're literally doing that because I just did not have time to record new episodes.
Okay, thank you for that tip. It's a great idea. I haven't considered it. Instead of putting a break or just saying, hey, no episode for today. This is just me ranting for 50 minutes. You can use an old episode. I like that.
And so I actually had written this down, and it's the biggest piece of advice that you've probably heard, and everyone knows you. So you need consistency, right? So cadence, I would say at least every 2 weeks, ideally every week. We are now doing 2 episodes a week because you're going to double your output, double your downloads. So once every 2 weeks, I don't think is great. Once a month is pointless. I just tell people don't even bother if you're going to do it once a month. Once every now and again is, which I've done an audit just recently. There was somebody who did an episode like every 3 months, and I was like, why are you bothering? Like, you've done 4 episodes in the last 12 months. Like, just, you need to commit. So what I would recommend for you, especially because you do have a busy life, is batch record episodes before you publish. So I would record at least 3, ideally 5 episodes before you even publish anything. I take a pause on what you're doing right now, record 3 to 5 episodes so you are a month ahead. Now, I'm the best person to tell people do what I say, not what I do, and I don't always do that. And for example, this episode we're recording on a Thursday, it will come out on Monday. I'm always chasing my tails, but sometimes I can get ahead, and sometimes on my other show, a Vietnam podcast, we're about 5 episodes ahead right now. And honestly, it makes my life so much better, so much easier that I'm not chasing my tail. This show, Smarter Podcasting, sometimes I'm 5 episodes ahead, other times, I mean, the best example was a month or 2 ago. I recorded on the Monday afternoon and we published it, edited 4 hours later. So it can be done, but it's much more stressful. So I would batch record at least 3, ideally 5. Some people do 10. That's quite intense. But you do as many as you can before you hit publish, and then it will help with anything that comes up in life and give you just a little bit more breathing room.
That's a very smart idea. I will have to organize the people I will invite, to be like Fridays I'm doing all recordings and this is my time slot. I will try to implement that because it makes it much easier than doing one and then life happens and you're lost.
And if you're doing it on Friday, I try and schedule 2 interviews that day, 2 or 3. Maybe 3 is a lot. Try and schedule at least 2 for 2 weeks in a row, and then within 2 weeks you've done 4 episodes and you're a month ahead. So I would think about doing that. Yeah. So that's consistency. So the next point I want to make is something that I think has been controversial. Some people disagree with me, but a lot of people agree with me. I've repeated this many times over the years that sound quality sound is more important than quality content. So it doesn't matter how amazing your content is, how good it is. If it sounds bad, people are going to turn off. And especially in this day and age where equipment's gone a lot cheaper, it's much easier to produce quality content. 5-10 years ago, people might have put up with the one microphone in a room that I started with, but now the bar has been raised. So I want to talk a little bit about your quality, which amazing you already know because you showed me you've got a new microphone, right? So the first thing you need to do is get a new microphone, which you've already done, but we're going to talk about that because I asked if you had a receipt. So you're using a headset, and that's fine, right? During COVID, I had a $5 headset, which looked really similar to what you were using. It's better to do something than nothing. And I cringe. I don't really cringe, but I laugh more when I look back at or listen to my first episodes. The quality was awful. I look at my first videos I ever did. I did with a 720p camera, no lights. The quality was awful, but I knew I wanted to start video and I knew I wanted to start now and I will get better as I go along. So that's the thing I always tell people, just aim to always get 1% better every episode. And eventually, and that's, I mean, I'm not just saying that, I literally lived that. You can go back on my YouTube channel and see some of the earliest episodes. They were goddamn awful. And this one's not even perfect, but I'm on my iPhone, which is in 4K. I've got a ring light. I got a Shure microphone. Is kind of off camera, but I've got a Shure microphone now as well. That didn't happen overnight. I didn't wait until I have all of that equipment to get started. I just built it up slowly. So the best thing you've done is just started, but I would invest, not even invest because it doesn't take much money. How much did you spend on that microphone you showed me?
I didn't want to invest because I want to see how the podcast goes. I think it was 33 pounds. It was something on low budget. And I said, I want to get a better microphone and see how that goes, if it improves. And I agree with you. The sound matters more. I hear podcasts. If the sound is bad, I'm skipping.
Been all right. So look at that microphone, look at the back, and when it tells you the specifications of it, does it say that it's a condenser microphone?
Ooh, great question.
I'm pretty sure it is from the picture on the front I can see. So this is why I love ChatGPT. I just type this in. Is Zero Sound K66 a condenser microphone? Yes, it is indeed a USB condenser microphone. All right, so we're going to get into what is a condenser microphone, why I hate them, and why you need to return that piece of shit. Right, here's the thing. A condenser microphone is one of the biggest misnomers in podcasting. You've been tricked, and so was I, and so is every other podcaster. I have no idea why every blog recommends getting the microphone that you got. That's why as soon as I saw it, I was tricked as well. They say it's plug and play, it's ideal for podcasting, blah, 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 blah. A condenser microphone is amazing in a soundproofed room, not sound treated, soundproofed, like somewhere where a singer would sing, where it's completely, the sound is locked in. I went into one time because my friend was a music producer and I felt nauseous within about 2 minutes because you've never been in somewhere where it's literally silence. There's no noise at all. So a condenser microphone is technically picks up more sound. It's a really good quality microphone. But because of that, a condenser microphone picks up the whole room, all that white noise in the background, the air con, the kids in the other room. It picks up everything. So I have no idea why every blog recommends every podcaster to get a condenser microphone because nobody's in a soundproof room and it's terrible, terrible sound quality. Now, what I'm using right now is called a dynamic microphone. You can buy one for the exact same price. It's not about price. It's not about quality. It's just a different type of microphone. So a dynamic microphone, and if you can see mine right here, and you see how close I have it to my mouth, a dynamic microphone only picks up the sound that's directly in front of it. It doesn't pick up anything else. So for years, I've been recording podcasts in my living room, which is an awful place to record a podcast. It's got tiles, it's got windows, it's massive. It's one of those rooms where you're like, this will be awful. But I use a dynamic microphone, so it doesn't pick up all this background noise that a condenser would. Then obviously I use Descript, and then I turn on studio sound. And if you use a dynamic microphone, you keep it close to your mouth. Because right now, right, I'll move the microphone away from my mouth. You probably can already hear that it's not as good, right? And when we do the edit, it's going to probably sound weird because I'm going to add studio sound, and studio sound doesn't like it when you move the microphone far away. But when you keep the microphone nice and close to your mouth like this, and I'm using like a $2 boom arm, like so if I just show my camera, yeah, I'm using like, this boom arm I got for like $2. You can buy them. I'm editing a podcast for a client. He paid $200 for a Rode boom arm. You can spend $200 if you want. You can also spend $2. So I make sure the microphone is close to my mouth. I've done audits before with somebody where they had a dynamic microphone, but they were like, why is my audio so bad? And I could see on the video that the microphone was like way up here. And I was like, you've got to move the microphone close to your mouth. So if you can return that, if you can't, don't worry about it. But if you can, return it, get a boom arm or a mic stand, get a dynamic microphone, and you're already using Descript. You said, turn on studio sound. And honestly, you will be blown away by how good the quality is for a $30 microphone. It's not this microphone I'm using. I hate to tell you, it's a $600 microphone that I got given as a gift. And I don't even like it that much. I have a cheaper microphone that I think is a better sound quality. So it's not about the cost of the microphone. It's about making sure it's dynamic and making sure it's no more than a fist away from your mouth.
Okay, I'm writing down. Very interesting because you're right. I think I know what you're referring. I saw it in a couple of recommendations. The microphone, it was, yeah, for the low budget tier, which I'm just starting. I don't want to invest. But everything you're describing makes perfect sense. I'm in my living room, kids in the other room, dogs playing, and so on. So I'm very curious. I will change it right away. Thank you for that.
Yeah, no worries. And I'm really excited. I want to hear the difference because honestly, it's just one of, as you can tell by how passionate I'm getting, it's one of the things that annoys me the most about. I don't understand. Like you read it, it's like plug and play and put it in with USB. Anyway, I'm gonna stop ranting about it. Right, let's get into your podcast now. So we haven't even really got into your podcast. And to be honest, I don't spend a huge amount of time. I don't go over your content at all. Any audit I do, I don't listen to content. It's not my field of expertise. I don't know anything. I don't know anything, but I don't know much. I don't know what you know about running a business or anything like that. So whatever audit I'm doing, I never listen to the content because that's not my field of expertise. Just a couple of things. So one was you talked about you're using Descript. I would use Descript even more. There was a couple of like awkward silences as well, which coupled with the poor audio quality just left. It wasn't a quality podcast, and I think you know that, and it can be even better. And I think from those questions I asked you in the beginning, you know your niche and you know your goal, and you've got a lot to share. So I would just do a little bit more editing to polish it up, basically, is the big thing. This is something that I think is the most pickiest thing that I can tell people. And I remember I told Nikki's son this on my last audit. It's so small, but I think it makes a difference. You start off by saying, hi, everyone. And she started off by saying, hi, sunshiners. And I learned this from Mark Steadman. What you're doing there is you're talking, and I do it as well. You're talking to a group of people. Hi, everyone. Nobody listens to podcasts in a group of people. You're not in a live audience talking to a room where you're like, hi, everyone. Some people are listening to podcasts on their own, in the bus, in the car, in the gym. So you should aim to talk to one person and build that one-on-one personal relationship. So it's just as simple as saying, hi, that's it. You'll just, because that one person is listening by themselves. So it seems really small, really picky. I learned this from Mark Steadman and I repeat it to everyone. I think it's a great piece of advice that you want to build a one-on-one personal relationship. And after I learned that, I noticed that some of the great YouTubers, podcasters, TV show hosts, they do that. They look at the camera and you feel like they're talking to you. They're not talking to a group of people. So that's just a really small one, but just I think it will make a difference. So that's one. The thing I love to give the feedback on the most, though, is the introduction. So that's really what I listen to because that's where you're going to capture people is the introduction and the outro a little bit, mostly the introduction, though. So great. You introduced the name of the podcast and what it's about. And it's quite brief and quite simple, which is perfect. You don't want to go into too much detail. Then you introduce the guest. But there was a massive, massive thing that you missed in your introduction. Have you any ideas what that was?
Thinking about your introduction, I think introducing myself.
100%. Yep, that was it. You didn't even say your name. So
Yes.
I said to you to listen to my introduction for this podcast, and I said, listen to the structure of it. I've never actually asked anyone to do that before. I normally just do it and then ask afterwards, but you were the first person I've ever said beforehand, listen to my introduction and the structure. So what did you take from that?
I liked how you not just introduced the guest, you also put a bit of spotlight in that introduction on yourself, what you are doing, and what the podcast, what is about. I already mentioned, but I didn't mention about what am I doing and more on that side. I basically put all the shine on the guest and the podcast. So that was an area I completely missed.
100%. So again, I just copy the greats. So what I'm doing there is introducing myself as the guide to the listener. Why am I the person that's going to take you through this episode? So I asked you in the beginning, what are the values and the goals that you want a listener to come away with at the end of each episode? To achieve that, you have a guest that's going to help you achieve that. They're going to share their story of a setback and how they overcame it. And I'm forgetting off the top of my head, you said like the golden nuggets or the golden rules of how the lessons that they use to overcome that. Is that right? Am I saying that correctly? So your job as a podcast host is the guide to guide the listener, not the guest, to guide the listener through that and help the guest share that story so that the listener walks away with the goals and the values that you want them to come away with. So you need to introduce yourself as why you are that guide. Why are you the expert? So that's all I did was follow a template. I said, hey, my name's Neil Mackay, the podcast guy. This is Smarter Podcasting. I said what it's about. We're going to help you make the best podcast possible. That's the goal of this podcast. I said who I am. I gave a brief 3-point summary of some achievements. So you know right away. If I was doing a podcast about finance and I said, hey, I'm Neil Mackay, the podcast guy. I've helped with millions of downloads. You'd be like, why is this guy giving me finance advice? And vice versa, right? So all I'm doing there is immediately telling you why I'm the person that is going to help you achieve that value, which is make the best podcast possible. Then the next thing I do is one of the favorite things I do. And I learned this from a YouTube video. And it was about how the late night show hosts introduce their guests. What they do is they just choose 3 bullet points, say those bullet points before their name, and then introduce the guest. So the best example, I think it was Jimmy Fallon. I always get them mixed up. It was Jimmy Fallon. And he said, my guest tonight, he's just done a sold out tour all around America. He's got the #1 comedy special on Netflix, and he's the biggest comedian in the world right now. My guest today is, and then out of the curtain, and he points, my guest today is Dave Chappelle. And the audience goes wild. So what you want to do is, and that's how I do it, 3 bullet points, 1, 2, 3. For you, I said you live in Scotland. It wasn't the best introduction I've ever done, but I said you live in Scotland, you run a business, and you help business owners overcome in boring businesses. 1, 2, 3. My guest today is Lumi Miron. So build it up a little bit. And people can, I'm not even the best at it, but since I started doing that, one, I can see my guest's face light up. They love it. They feel good. So you're getting a good start to the podcast right away. And then for the audience, you're building that guest up for the audience. And so one of the things is quite funny. I've actually got a post coming up on LinkedIn where we actually met. And I talk about something called the ghost introduction, which is what many people do. And they say, all right, so today we have Sarah. Sarah, tell us about yourself. I literally wrote that post like yesterday and it's going out tomorrow, I think. And I listened to your podcast and I was like, oh my God, you do exactly that. So you did exactly that. You were like, hey, Ali, tell us about yourself. And he was kind of thrown off. He was a bit awkward, like, oh, he didn't really know what to say. Said something. And then even at the end of it, he was like, I can't even remember exactly what he said, but it was kind of awkward. He was like, is that okay? Or do you remember what I'm talking about?
Yes, I remember exactly what you're talking about.
So I'll send you the template. We got a document. I've got it on my website as well. It's just that template of introduce the show, what the value of the show is, introduce yourself, why you're the guide, what the episode is about, what the value of the episode is to the listener, and who your guest is. 3 points, then their name, boom, and then the show starts. And that's about 2 minutes. I've heard some shows where there's that other type of introduction. It's like the Wikipedia introduction where they're like, in 1975, they spoke at a conference about diamonds and minerals. Then in 1980, and they go through like that. You're laughing because you've heard it, right? And it's like 20 minutes later, like, and my guest today is Dave Smith. And you're like, I've already shut off like 15 minutes ago.
Yes, I know that the long one are pretty boring. Very valuable lessons for me here. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, no problem. I'll send you that template as well. So that's fine. And then as I listened through, one thing I talked to you about before this, I didn't really hear any talking over each other, which is great. That's what I'm always listening for. Competing voices. I find it really frustrating. I've done audits before when there's one person talking and the other one's just going, okay, yep, and I'm like, I really don't want to hear the other person talking. Again, podcast is like a personal relationship. It's one-on-one. I want to hear what the speaker is saying. I don't want to hear what the other person is thinking. So I didn't hear any of that. That was great. I didn't hear you jumping over each other. You let each other speak. So that was great. And then I just kind of went to the end to get to the outro. Now, the ending was quite sudden, but was that by design?
I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know how to properly wrap it. And I said, okay, maybe we'll figure out in the moment, which wasn't the best decision considering it was the first episode. I'm thinking of having a question. I saw many other podcasts like the Impact Theory, which I really love. They have like same question for all the guests at the end, but that came afterwards. or creating a standard wrap up, like a 3 bullet summary using maybe the same recipe as you said for the end. But this all comes now. So yes, the ending was just in the moment.
There's definitely different ways to do it. I've seen people do it successfully where they're listening and taking notes, and at the end they kind of summarize it. I'm not a big fan of that one. The reason I asked was it by design is because what I've been doing for months now, because most podcasts now are on YouTube, and I do YouTube as well, but not just for YouTube. What I learned was the algorithm obviously really values engagement, and if you start to signal to the listener that the podcast is ending, people are already switching to a different video, or even if it's a podcast, they're already clicking to the next episode, right? Like I never listen to the credits. I think the credits are the biggest waste of time for most podcasts. So what I learned, which I use this advice and I give it, is I do end my shows quite abruptly. So I tell my guests before, because in the beginning I forgot to tell my guests and I felt really rude because I'd be like, all right, finished, thanks. But then I always remind them. So I avoid saying things like one more question, last question, things like that. If you do want to do segments, I do think those work. So if you have the same last question, honestly, like people love repetition. If you can do the same thing every episode, it's absolutely fine. So that's fine if that's your signal for the end of the episode. This is the final question, blah, blah, blah. I don't think that's a problem. I think as long as you don't trail off at the end, or you don't, yeah, I've seen it before when people are like, okay, so we'll finish up soon. I've got one more question for you. And it's just kind of like, if you're bold with the podcast, how do you think the listener feels? So what I do to help with engagement is I just kind of out of nowhere end it. So I don't give any signal that it's the last question. In my head, I know it's the last question. And then I'll just go, well, Lumi, thank you very much for being on the podcast. Remember, review, subscribe, share, blah, 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 all that nonsense. Thanks very much. Bye. And then just end it, because it just doesn't give the viewer or the listener any time to really go to another episode.
Okay, so maybe my mistake was a good way to end that. I will try to see how it goes. I like the idea of having a standard question like for everyone maybe and segment it. But for now, also ending like that makes it easier for me because I don't have to add something else to prepare at the end of the show for each guest.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So either way works, but I thought it was not terrible. It was good, because that's why I was like, was it by design? Because you just ended it, and I was like, oh, that's what. That's the best way to do it instead of slowly winding it down. So yeah, that was all right. So that was the meat of your podcast. I also looked at your artwork and your podcast names and titling and things like that. And I know you've just started, but just some quick advice was, one thing was your artwork. I would drop the word podcast from your podcast title. And again, this is one of the things, do what I say, not what I do, because my main show, which just passed 100,000 downloads, is called A Vietnam Podcast, and it has the name podcast in it. But I did start it in 2019. The reason I would drop the word podcast from your artwork is because people know it's a podcast, that they don't need to be told again. So I think second acts is fine. And it just takes up space, basically. It's just a waste of space because your space is really limited with a podcast. So I would drop that from your name. And then the best advice from someone called Adam Shibley, who I always look at everything that he does, and he's been on this show, is for like searchability. He says SEO, but it's a different issue. For searchability, I would add a tagline. So if you look at any of my shows, like A Vietnam Podcast is called A Vietnam Podcast, comma, culture, community, and conversations. And the reason I did that is because people often think anything about Vietnam is about the Vietnam War. And I wanted people to realize that it's not, and it's about something different. So just 3 words, which just helps people. You just think about user experience. They're scrolling, they've typed in Vietnam, or they've typed in podcasts about Vietnam. They see all these things about war and blah, blah, blah. And then they scroll and they see mine and they're like, oh, that's different. And for this show, it's called Smarter Podcasting, Making Podcasts Better. So even that, I don't like it. I think it's terrible. It's not clear enough. But I think for yours, second acts, overcoming adversity, or the goal of your podcast, I'm again forgetting how you would word it, but just 2 or 3 words, nothing long because there's limited space on the app, but just do second acts, because nobody's going to search second acts. And they might be looking for something about theater or something like that, right? But if you put overcoming business or creating better businesses, something related to your goals and your objectives, so that if someone is searching, it's a higher chance that your podcast is going to come up. So I would advise that. Just having a look at your artwork. Did you make it yourself?
Yes.
Yeah.
I want to have a designer, but as I said, I'm just starting out. I don't want to invest. I'm not sure how it goes. I like the idea of podcast. I like talking. So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I'm not a designer at all. I don't have an art. I can barely draw a stick figure. Like I cannot. I'm not a good designer at all. But I've gotten better over the years. And as soon as I looked at it, you could see by the font and the spacing. I was like, this looks like. Did one of your children design it? No, I'm just kidding. I'm being mean. No, no. I was like this. I was like, it just. So my note is get a professional designer, even if it's someone on Fiverr that will literally do it for $5, $10. They'll do an amazing job. You don't have to spend a lot of money. But the most important thing with that artwork is remember that I think it's like 80% of people listen to podcasts on their phone. I'm looking at it on a desktop right now. I can read it clearly, but most people are looking on a phone. I would minimize the wording, get rid of the microphone as well is the other thing. Every podcast artwork you look at has a microphone and the word podcast on it. And it's like people are listening to it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify podcasts. They know it's a show, they know it's a podcast. So just remove all of that because it frees up space. I would also use your picture. People like people. So I get your picture on there and just get a professional designer to make it look a little bit better.
I will do that. I will go on Fiverr today and find someone that can take the idea and make it look better, more professional.
I looked at the title and they've only got one episode. So really good to get this in as a habit now. We have repeated the name. So I'm looking on Spotify. I can see second acts at the top. I see second acts on the artwork and I see second acts as the first two words in the title. So it's that repetition. And just again, people use their phone. Space is really limited. So I advise that you don't use the name or the number at the front of the title. So I would, from yours, it's called When Life Gives You Lemons. It's a great name. I would move that to the front. When Life Gives You Lemons with Ali Shah Ali. And then if you want to do the episode number, I would just do it at the very end so it never really appears anywhere. I add the numbers and the seasons at the end, just kind of for my own reference. Unless your show is in sequential order, like a story, and it's like episode 1, episode 2, episode 3, where it needs to be listened to in order, or you want to be really, really particular and be like some of the big podcasters and be like, oh, go back to episode 276. I don't think your episodes need numbers at all. And on the apps like Spotify and Apple Podcasts, they give them numbers anyway. So when your real estate is so limited, I would just not take up any of the space in the beginning. Because even right now on Spotify, if you look, normally most of the titles get cut off and you get the 3 dots. So those first, I think it's like 70 characters are the most important. So when you're doing your titles, try and get the most important information that's going to grab someone's attention in the first 70 characters, if I remember off the top of my head. So have a think about that. I looked at your notes. They were really good. I loved your notes. Just for our example, what we do though is we always start with a quote from the episode that's going to grab someone's attention to make it really personal. So we have that in quotation marks directly from the episode. And then one thing that we've been doing for the last few months, and I don't have any data whether this makes any difference to your downloads, but we write the show notes in the first person, which I think makes a difference. So I say, I speak to Ali Shah Ali in this episode about, I make it because that's what podcasts are, personal. So nearly every show notes are like, in this episode, Lumi talks to blah, 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 right? And it's like in this weird third person. I would write it in the first person to make it even more personal. Everyone uses AI these days for show notes. We do as well. But one of the things you have to be smart with AI. I did an audit recently, and every single episode started with, in this episode, dot, dot, dot. Next one, in this episode, dot, dot, dot. Actually, sorry, I take that back. It wasn't an audit. It was a professionally made podcast by a massive newspaper in the UK. I won't say the name. Amazing podcast. I love the show. But every single episode I scrolled down said in this episode. And I was like, that's the biggest telltale sign that it's made with AI. Because if you put in your transcript into AI and you say, write me the show notes for this without any real prompt or direction, the first thing it will spit out is in this episode. So use AI 100%, but just give it a proper prompt. Give it an example as well. So like we have a template again. It's got the quote at the beginning, then first person show notes. We tell the prompt, write the show notes in this style, in the first person, choose a quote, and then we'll make sure it's what we want. So that's just a small thing. I loved your about section. Tells you exactly what the podcast does. So that was really good as well. I think that about section is what you need to use for your introduction. So I'm just going to read from your about section. My name is Lumi Miron. Second, I'm a business coach. I've been helping businesses for blah, blah, blah. I've had bankruptcies, failures, all of this stuff. So now I'm going to help businesses overcome setbacks to be successful. In this show, we're going to unpack the plot twists behind real comebacks. Every episode, we share the raw moments, breakups, bankruptcies, injuries that shattered plans, and the mindset shifts, habits, and boundaries that rebuilt them. That's really inspiring. Like, I love your about section. I think you don't even need to rewrite anything for your intro. Just take what's in your about section and then use that for your intro.
Thank you. That's wow. I have so many notes. I'm just gonna look forward to starting rebuilding this in a better way. Yes, the about section, I tweak it many times until I got to that form, which I think is capture the essence of what I want to do with the podcast.
I love it. It's absolutely brilliant. Lumi, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for being on Smarter Podcasting. I'm really excited to see where your podcast goes from this. And don't forget, if you like this podcast, rate, review, subscribe, share. That is the best thing that you can do. Share this podcast with somebody else who wants to make the best podcast possible. And if you want to work with me and 7 Million Bikes Podcast, go to 7millionbikes.com. Lumi, thank you very much. Cheers.
Thanks, Neil. Bye.